open the public portion of the July 19th, 2023 Public Ridgefield Park Board of Education meeting. The time is now 7:33. We start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Dr. Bustamante, could you call the roll?
Mr. Cathcart. Mr. Cooney. Mrs. Kraft.
Here.
Mr. Phytros.
Here.
Mr. Gomes.
Here.
Mrs. McNeil.
Here.
Mrs. Rodriguez.
Here.
Mrs. Velez.
Here.
Mrs. Ord.
Here.
Dr. Martinez. We have a quorum.
Can you read the open?
The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of the public bodies at which any business affecting their interests is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the Ridgefield Park Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, place thereof posted in the Bergen Record, Star Ledger, Municipal Building, Board of Education offices, and the district website. Public participation instructions. Public participation will be conducted both in person and virtually through Zoom. All public will be muted throughout the meeting. Public participation comments are limited to 5 minutes. The public will be able to both speak and be seen by the board when participating virtually, telephonically, via Zoom. Individuals participating virtually that wish to make comments during the public participation will need to raise their hand by clicking the blue hand icon at the bottom of the Zoom window. Individuals participating by telephone that wish to make comments during public participation will need to hit *9 on their telephone to raise their hand. The Business Administrative Board Secretary will then unmute individuals one at a time to speak in the order that their hand was raised.
Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from the March 1st, 16th, and April 5th meetings?
Make a motion. Second.
Any questions, concerns, or comments on the minutes?
Mr. Cathcart show up? No. Okay. Mrs. Kraft?
Yes.
Mr. Phytros?
Yes.
Mr. Gomes?
Yes.
Mrs. McNeil?
Yes.
Mrs. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Mrs. Velez?
Yes.
Mrs. Ord?
Yes.
Motion carried.
For correspondence, the board received a correspondence from Mr. J. Sean Sadler regarding agenda item 1501 tabled from the June 26th meeting. Let's move to committee reports. Negotiations, Trustee McNeil.
No report, thank you.
Trustee Cooney is not here, but the Buildings and Ground Committee did not meet this month. We plan to meet before the next board meeting. Policy, Trustee Rodriguez.
The policy committee did not meet, but we plan on meeting on August 1st.
Faculty and programs, Trustee Kraft.
Good evening. The Faculty and Programs Committee met on July 11th. Present were Dr. Vespignani, Board President Dr. Martinez, myself, Trustee Rodriguez, and Trustee Gomes. Some of the things we discussed, the first thing that we discussed was preschool. We got an update. Administration has conducted some on-site visits to ensure that the locations are getting ready. We wanted to make sure that our families are receiving adequate information regarding placement as soon as possible. We discussed the fields for fall sports. Dr. Vespignani met with Mr. Raimondi regarding, in particular, the soccer fields, where there was an issue in the previous soccer season. So I believe he is in communication with Mr. Raimondi regarding the plan for the fall. We discussed, Dr. Vespignani is in touch with the county superintendent regarding both the 23-24 emergency virtual and remote plan and the ESEA grants regarding timely submission of those documents. We discussed the Lego initiative. That is something that's going to be moving forward in our elementary schools with regards to offering some STEM opportunities for our students. We discussed bringing back or making more active, actually, our social justice subcommittee and our homeschool connection subcommittees in the fall. And lastly, Trustee Gomes, expressed his interest in strengthening our current CTE programming moving forward. And that's it.
Thank you. Finance and Insurance, Trustee Gomes.
Thank you. Finance Committee met on Monday. Present were Dr. Vespignani, myself, Trustee Ort, standing in for President Martinez, Trustee McNeil, and Trustee Cathcart. We held this meeting more of a high-level type meeting, trying to bring Dr. V up to speed on some of the issues we were handling in the past. He has been touring the buildings, meeting people, learning about programs. He's also waiting for the new BA, who hopefully will start soon, so we can get a stronger central office. Part of our discussion, Trustee McNeil wanted to know about some of the things on the agenda with the Title I and IDA grants. Dr. V is looking into that, and he will give us feedback. The concern was we just want to make sure that everything is on track to be approved and be similar to what's already in the budget. We discussed the busing program. Dr. V met with Steve Green to discuss the aging of our busing and the program overall. We did explain to Dr. V that in the past we had asked for a feasibility study, and we have some of the issues we were having with respect to busing in general, and we also asked for an update with respect to meetings between Richfield Park and Little Ferry with respect to busing. We asked about breakage and salaries. Dr. V's, he has a lot of positions to fill, and we're just concerned, or at least we want to make sure that everything is going to be as budgeted. We briefly discussed the overpack field, which was similar to what was just mentioned in the Faculty and Programs Committee report. From the standpoint, I really just want to know how much more would it cost us as a district if we were to go to overpack. As of now, the only thing would be an application fee of $395. Finally, we discussed the before and after care program. There was a use of facilities form that was submitted earlier in the year, but it was never put up on the budget. So Dr. B is going to check with Mr. Egan regarding that. We went into further discuss some of the rates and whether the rates that are currently being charged is what the is best for the district and the board. The policy committee is working on that, and they will get back to him. And finally, Dr. B and the rest of the trustees, we ended saying that the one thing we really want is to make sure that there is a program in place come September for families. And Dr. V assured us he's going to do what's best for the district. That's my report.
Thank you, Trustee Gomes. And for the Personnel Committee met on July 11th. Present were Dr. Vespignani, Dr. Martinez, myself, Trustee Kraft, and Trustee Cooney. Discussion took place regarding the recommendation on tonight's agenda for the BA position. We also reviewed and discussed the proposed job descriptions for the newly created positions of Assistant Superintendent, the updated job descriptions for Confidential Human Resources Assistant and Payroll Manager, and the Director of Pre-K position. We also discussed other open teaching positions in the district. Dr. V provided the board with a description of the process involved in approving volunteer coaches. The process is consistent with what is outlined in our policy. Also consistent with that policy, the item is placed on the board agenda based on the recommendation of the superintendent of schools. Dr. V provided the board with a copy of some interview and hiring processes that he has established and distributed to the appropriate district personnel. I believe that ends our committee reports. So, Dr. Vespignani, your superintendent report?
Thank you, Vice President Orth. Feedback. Thank you, Vice President Orth. Very excited to be sharing my first superintendent's report with everyone this evening. I can tell you it's really been wonderful to begin to acclimate to the district. How's the sound? Still an echo. I think that should be better now. No? Try this mic, slightly better. I think we may need to remove that mic from the stage. Again, super excited to be with all of you this evening and to provide my first superintendent's report. I've been out doing a lot of listening and learning and touring facilities. As you know, I began on July 1st, and my family and I had the pleasure of joining the community to participate in the parade. I'm pretty sure that my shoes are now dry. They may need another day or so, but it was a wonderful experience. I can tell you my son came home and said, "Dad, that was really a lot of fun." Now that I'm in district, again, I believe I've met with every administrator, including directors, supervisors, and principals, assistant principals. It's been great getting to know them a bit more on a personal and also professional level. Touring the schools has been wonderful as well, getting to see some of our summer programs and facility work in motion. And I have posted on the district website and sent a letter in regard to a meet and greet that I'll be conducting here in the cafeteria on August 7th, just prior to our next board meeting from 7:30 until 8:30. So I look forward to engaging in conversation with community members, parents, guardians, faculty and staff, and hope to see some students as well. Just an update, and it was shared in one of the committee reports in regard to our pre-K program. I have toured both sites, the Co-op and Little Stars, and I met with both directors alongside our new director of early childhood education. We're excited to continue this partnership and expansion and provide wonderful services for our youngest learners. I can share that we've been partnering with our district registrar to ensure that we are monitoring the required documentation by our families to fully enroll in the program. Wait list is being monitored, as well as the placement sites being confirmed, in which case families should expect those shortly to receive a letter from our director of early childhood education to confirm placement. And in conversation with the directors of both programs, they'll be following up with their own personal letter to set an orientation for a bit of a meet and greet with families and the new students. In the committee report, the volunteer recommendation was highlighted, and I wanted to provide some context on that. As you may know, I had participated as an audience member at 2 previous board meetings, and I was present to listen and learn of some of the perspectives from our community members. Understanding that as a result of that motion being, that resolution being tabled, that this would now fall under my potential recommendation. I immediately reviewed board policy 9181, And I can share that I had conversations with various individuals that would have oversight of a volunteer athletic coach. So I first had a conversation with our athletic director. I then had a conversation with our head football coach, and then had a conversation with our high school principal, all of whom confirmed their strong support for this recommendation. And they did not provide any doubt or reservation as to why this recommendation should not be made to me. And subsequently this evening, as listed on the agenda, I'm making the recommendation to the board. In regard to hiring, we of course have various vacancies throughout the district, and in meeting with our principals and supervisors, we've had conversations around those to ensure that we are fully staffed. So we're in the process of determining which positions still need to be posted, and we're hopeful to make a recommendation by no later than the August 23rd board agenda. As you know, we have several administrative vacancies as well, one of which is our business administrator vacancy. And just to share a little bit about that process, similar to the expectation that I've shared with some administrators in regard to the interview and hiring process, I hold myself accountable to that same expectation. So multiple rounds, and in this case, there were 4 rounds of an interview process. The first was a phone screening with some candidates who were then narrowed down to a first round interview with myself, and then a second round, or could be deemed the third round if you're including the phone screening, was conducted by myself and Mr. Egan, our fiscal state monitor. And then a final round was held with myself, Mr. Egan, and Vice President Orth. And I'm pleased to share and make a recommendation to the board this evening for Ms. Tina Trueba, who is with us here in the audience. Thank you for joining this evening, to be recommended for our BA vacancy. Ms. Trueba comes to us with a great deal of experience in comparable district, and we're very excited to have her on board and to have her place her mark on all district business office operations. And I look forward to having her on the central office team pending approval from the board this evening. Just a bit of some other items. We have our payroll manager vacancy currently in process. Pending board approval this evening, there is a resolution for Ms. Trueba to have indemnification, so she can begin to consult and take part in various processes. So we're hopeful to make a recommendation to the board for that position for August 9th. We are intent to post for our assistant BA vacancy. Naturally, we would want our new BA to have a hand in that process, as that's a direct report to the BA. So it's anticipated that we'll be posting for that tomorrow. Pending board approval this evening for the Assistant Superintendent of Schools job description. We would be posting for that position tomorrow as well. In evaluating district needs, looking at the previous org chart from 2011, I had learned that at one point there was actually 2 assistant superintendents. So I'm pleased to make this recommendation to the superintendent, to the board rather, for this Assistant Superintendent of Schools job description, as I feel it will have a significant impact on all district operations. We have also posted for our confidential HR assistant vacancy, and that interview process will be beginning shortly. And we're hopeful to make recommendations for all these positions either by August 9th and or for August 23rd. And before I can conclude my superintendent's report, I just wanted to pause and thank Dr. Guzmano for his time here in district. I've worked with him and partnered with him on various projects, and he's been a great source of knowledge and has provided us with stability in this time of change. So thank you, Dr. Guzmano.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vespiniani. Before hearing citizens' comments on agenda, I would like to ask for a motion to amend the order of the meeting to read new business and unfinished business items into the regular agenda to allow the public to comment.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it, Michelle.
Oh, any discussion on amending the order of the meeting? Seeing none, then we can just take the roll.
Mr. Cathcart,
Yes.
Mrs. Kraft,
Yes.
Mr. Phytros,
Yes.
thank you. Mr. Gomes,
Yes.
Mrs. McNeil,
Yes.
Mrs. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mrs. Velez,
Yes.
Mrs. Orr,
Yes.
motion carried.
We will now hear citizens' comments on agenda items. Belinda, would you please read the rules?
For tonight's meeting, two public comment sessions, one on agenda and one off agenda items. There is a sign-up sheet on the podium. We'll call your name in the order that you sign in. Each member of the public will have 5 minutes to speak during each comment period. Time cannot be transferred to other individuals. The public comment period will be 1 hour for on-agenda items and 1 hour for non-agenda items. The board will now entertain public comment. Please remember to state your name, Richford Park mailing address, and keep your comments brief to allow sufficient time for other members of the public to speak if they wish. Thank you for your cooperation and support.
Can I say something real quick? Sorry. Trustee Ort, is there no state monitor's report today?
I don't believe the state monitor is in attendance.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. DeSantis?
Susan DeSantis, 15 Homestead Place, 1307. You're taking an accomplished woman that trains teachers to become administrators and writes curriculum for postmasters and Jersey Excel as a non-hoc professor at Mamrico College in the Masters of Science Education Technology program and as a supervisor of teachers education program. She serves as a leader's mentor, a former NJPSA and FEA Board of Trustees. She's written 12 K-12 curriculum and designed graduate and postgraduate courses. She's a technology specialist with a business background. She's been selected as Bergen County Administrator of the Year. She's been chosen twice as the #1 school in testing, made the most disadvantaged school in RP a blue ribbon school, and consistently produced test scores significantly above the other 2 elementary schools. For running Grant School was chosen to and successfully opened and ran Thomas Jefferson. She was nominated for the Terrell Bell Award by the U.S. Department of Education. She's written 7th and 8th grade curriculum. She had this district running within days when other districts couldn't acquire the tools for remote learning and COVID. She instituted a new environmental summer program for all students with a component that addresses specifically for special ed students. She's revamped our cooking program into a culinary program for students that wanted to progress into the culinary field and expanded and revamped our science program labs. It's, I don't know how this is utilizing her talents and training by putting her in charge of pre-K program. It's my impression this is why Diane Zeman was not reinstated. The pre-K was left without leadership because this was the plan for Dr. Bender all along, to marginalize her and drive her out. Am I wrong? We'll go to 9:30. The job description, Dr. Bender is not pre-K certified, nor is she N8 certified, so she's not qualified for the position that you're putting her in tonight. How can you hire for a job when she does not fit the criteria? Didn't you check her certifications with her or Karen before you changed the criteria from last year's requirements for director of pre-K?
I'm sorry, I don't understand what your question is.
I said the requirements are pre-K certification and N3 certification. Dr. Bender is neither qualified or certified pre-K or N3. So how can she be hired for a job that she does not fit the job description?
Unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to comment on a personnel matter.
That's not a personnel matter on how you can hire somebody doesn't fit the requirements.
You're speaking directly to her qualifications for a position. It is a personnel matter that I cannot comment on
Her
publicly.
qualifications are a public document. They're public. And your job description is public. How can you hire anybody for a position that they're not qualified to hold?
Thank you, Mr. Santos. Getting some feedback. So whereas Vice President Orth had correctly indicated that this would potentially touch personnel, what I can share in regard to the job description, if you do read the qualification, there's language in there regarding the certification of certification equivalency.
Or what's equivalent to pre-K or N8?
I'm not certain what else we can say. I think we've said all that we can say in the public session. If you have further questions, you're welcome to reach out to V individually.
You can't answer what's equivalent to pre-K or N8?
I would venture to say that we've evaluated her experience and found it to be equivalent.
Okay, who was on the interview committee? Where is this posted? Where is it advertised? So that anyone can have a position? 1307.
Again, I'm sorry, I'm not able.
Where a position that you're required to post was posted and advertised? Any new position you're required to post to the employees in the district and in the newspaper so that people can apply. Where was it posted? When was it posted? And who was on the interview committee?
To comment on that.
Was there an interview committee?
It was an appointment by the state monitor.
Okay. 1501. First, just a point. Jody pulled this resolution, which is not the same as tabling as a resolution, just to clarify that. Pulling it is removing it.
She did not pull it.
Tabling,
It
yes,
was
she did.
tabled.
You have to listen to the tape. She said, remove it. I want this removed. Mr. Gibbons, this man's behavior as a board member was a disgrace, And additionally, because the superintendent followed the health officials to shut down football practices, he incited the football players to protest the superintendent's office, yelling obscenities while he sat in a car across the street laughing. This was observed by law enforcement. This is documented. Mr. Gibbons also disregarded the shutdown of football practice by having the players practice behind the storage units where the cheerleaders practiced on the baseball field. These incidents were in his role as a volunteer football coach, not as a board member. This is what Mr. Gibbons bestows on our students as a role model, completely disregarding the rules and suffering no ramifications to breaking the rules. I'll also add that it was the football players that made us aware multiple times that Mr. Gibbons was in fact coaching when he wasn't supposed to be coaching as a sitting board member. Approving this resolution shows this board what this board thinks is okay as a role model for our students. This ongoing behavior among certain people without consequences is a serious problem in this district, especially at the high school level. And approving Mr. Gibbons continues to solidify this behavior. This is not okay.
Thank you for your comments.
Yeah.
Mr. DeSantis?
Hello, everyone. Dr. Vespiani, welcome. And Tina Churiba, welcome. Just have a few questions, but I'm going to comment on something my wife said. We've always, in Ridgefield Park, we're able to talk about whether a specific individual meets the qualifications of job description in general. We've had it with coaches and science teachers that didn't have their certification yet. And it's not a confidential matter. I'm sure that Board of Attorney would agree because we're talking in a broad spectrum. So it is not confidential if the job description doesn't fit her resume or her certifications. And usually there is something that's got to be resolved for that to happen, whether it's training or it's the wrong fit. So a bug in your ear that it does not fall on their personnel.
Mr. Disler? Would I be able to comment on this at all? I mean, to me,
Yeah.
it's speaking to specifically an individual's qualifications for a position. I don't think I'm allowed to discuss that in public, correct?
I would like to discuss generally the position, the qualifications and the like. That's certainly appropriate, but I would not recommend that the board go into any specific individuals who would be, I would not go into specific individuals discussing them and their relationship to a specific position in the district. I think that's where we get into an issue where we're in personnel, right? Because we're talking about the specific individual, their qualification for the job, what they're going to be like in the job, and that's where. But certainly, we can discuss the position, the qualifications, and the like.
I'll concede to that. That makes sense. In the big picture, the job description has to match the qualifications. I don't know how you're going to resolve that, but it's something that has to be resolved.
I think Dr. V did address that.
Well, I did the county
That
approve it?
that the job description allows for equivalent experience.
Yes, the job description was approved by the county office.
Okay, I'm going to move on. Welcome, Tina Truba. Truba. Okay. We'll get it close. We got Vespiani down, so we can do anything now. In searching, I know that you worked in the past for Little Ferry. That's not a sin. the wonderful people of Little Ferry and their children that come here are part of the school community. I wonder, in doing so, and where the recommendation came from, do you feel a push-pull in an area where we're not always on the same page, especially in the business office? And making you aware of that, do you see potential conflicts or difficulties? Just being very honest and open.
Mr. DeSantis, can I ask that you keep your comments to the board?
Okay.
Thank
Michelle,
you.
do you think that Tina will have a hard time? I hate saying it that way. It doesn't seem right, but I'm concerned about some conflicts. I know Dr. Hayes had some. I'm not saying don't hire her. I'm not saying she's not a very competent person. I know she's been with various districts part-time. When sometimes negotiations get ugly, I think it's a tough position for somebody that comes from Little Ferry. So it's just a comment. You can take what you want and understand it for what I mean by that. The last thing I want to mention is an assistant superintendent. Sometime in 2017, I believe at the end of the school year, we still had two assistant superintendents, Mr. Kraujek, and we had Joseph Newberg. The county and or the state told us we could not have any more assistant superintendents because of our district size. Now this is back on the agenda, and of course it'll cost money, but what has happened since June 30th to now that we would be hiring an assistant superintendent? Well, put to the side to the fact that Dr. Bender wasn't interviewed for that as our former. We're just talking about the concept of the position. How do we get an assistant superintendent here already?
Thank you, Mr. DeSantis, for your question. So after evaluating district needs, reviewing job descriptions, reviewing previous org charts, you're correct. There was an assistant superintendent of curriculum instruction, and I believe another title of assistant superintendent for personnel services related to special education. And again, just looking at the org charts and job descriptions and taking a look at immediate district needs, appropriately followed protocol to submit that job description to the county superintendent for approval, which we now have.
And they reversed their original opinion and now said it's okay. And we have it in the budget.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, that's it for now. All right, thank you. Thank you for your.
Thank you. Janet Malul.
Janet Malul, 163 East Grand. First, I'm looking at the Director of Early Childhood Education. It is a huge amount of responsibility that's being placed on one person. I don't care who the person is. The other thing that stands out to me is the fact that I have the page here. There's also a requirement in here, which I don't understand why it would be if this is a pre-K supervising position, to be overseeing the K-6 or grades 1 to 6 observations. I'm trying to find where it is on my pages are not stapled together here. So this is really, oh, here it is, number 29. Conduct observations of K-6 staff as assigned. So this is really two jobs in one, in my mind.
Just offers us some flexibility in the position.
I'm going to be
Note
blunt.
that it is as assigned, as assigned.
So she could be whoever takes this job. And I put it that way because as far as I know, this wasn't voted on yet. Okay, I'm sure you're all going to go ahead and approve it because nobody would stand against that typically with this group. But I'm reading this, honestly, I would not take this job. And I wouldn't take this job because I look at it and you have to be Superman or Superwoman to be able to, with a brand new program that's going to be across 2 different schools, well, or more, the pre-K program. And then you have 3 elementary schools with all its staff. And you're expecting one person to be able to, at some point, address, what is it? 28, 30 points. Here we go again, asking the person to walk on water. And you know what? I'm going to say something. I'm tired of sitting in the audience and watching smirks on certain people's faces. This is just unfair. The other thing is, what makes you think that maybe Diane Thiemann didn't want to apply for this job? What makes you think that maybe Dr. Bender was better off as going back to being a principal in the school? Or maybe she was better off being in charge of curriculum, which is a strong point. But this seems to be what you're offering. And you're not offering her anything else that's reasonable. And again, I will be watching. And when this starts to be the same situation when you brought her back, where from the time she came in for those last 4 months, she couldn't do a single thing right by most of you. And that's what's going to happen here. Just keep it in the back of your heads. I am watching. As far as the assistant superintendents, I don't understand why we need 2 people to do those jobs when we've managed to do it without. And the fact that if we want to get rid of the state monitor at some point, which I really hope we do, this is being physically irresponsible. Dr. V, according to your bio or whatever is written on the page on the website, you have a phenomenal history supposedly with getting test scores up and all this stuff. So I would think that you were brought on to take those actions to make that happen here. And I don't know whether you have a plan for it yet or not. I would hope you do. To me, that's a job that should fall on you at this point. So I'm really questioning some of this. And it's really kind of interesting that all of a sudden, the county is now saying, oh yeah, you can do that. When years ago, we were told, no, we couldn't. So I don't know. I don't know what to think. And this idea that also certain jobs are being posted and other jobs aren't being posted. They're being by appointment. Who makes the decision as to what's an appointment and what's a job description that gets put out there for the public and maybe somebody in the district? I don't know how that works here. Can someone address that?
The state monitor has full authority to appoint or to dismiss any personnel.
Okay, so then we're back to the state monitor basically runs the district. And that's why we need to get rid of them. And that's why we've got to get our acts together. And we also need to start being more fiscally responsible. That's it.
Thank you for your comments. Ms. Gottlieb?
Ms. Gottlieb, 464A Liberty Street, Little Ferry. Yeah, the thing that struck me, welcome, Dr. V. Assistant superintendent, maybe it's just a title, but you just got here. I don't understand. I mean, I understand maybe there are things you need to delegate, but it just seems like strange that from 2017 to, let's say, maybe 2015 or so to now, pretty much the district has not had that title filled. Okay, maybe with Dr. Newberg and the other guy had it for a while, but basically for many years, there wasn't one. If you're going to want this person to do curriculum, which seems to be a hole, give them director of curriculum. But assistant superintendent implies other things. And it just, I don't know, just doesn't sit right with me. And the other thing is I want to welcome Tina to Ridgefield Park. I worked with her as a board member over in Little Ferry, and I think she'll be a great asset to your district. She knows us, which is not a bad thing, and she'll get to know you. And hopefully it'll help run things smoother for both of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gottlieb. Mr. Sadler?
Hi, good evening. Sorry, Jay Sean Sadler, 139 Overpeck Avenue. I just jotted a couple of thoughts down. Let me read it to you. So I'd like to thank the board and our new superintendent for taking the time to review concerns I expressed at a previous meeting and through correspondence regarding resolution 15.01. This matter is not political, nor does it involve any personal grievance against Mr. Gibbons. For me, this matter speaks to the integrity of our school district and our fidelity to a set of values I'd like to presume we all share: respect, honesty, personal integrity, care, etc. When we establish rules, do we expect members of our community to abide by them or not? Whether staff members, students, volunteers, or whoever. If one does not abide by set rules, is there any accountability or corrective action taken to uphold the rules we set? Resolution 15.01 speaks directly to these questions for me. I don't expect this board or our superintendent to do whatever I want it to do. I expect all those who work to serve our community to do what is right. The fact of this matter is that Mr. Gibbons very clearly broke rules in his role as a volunteer. There are many matters brought to our board of which I have no firsthand knowledge. This particular matter, though, I experienced myself. I've witnessed it. I personally witnessed and experienced Mr. Gibbons's harmful behavior and his misconduct. He very clearly conducted himself with a brazen and glaring lack of integrity or care, willfully employing racist tropes against myself, another community member, Mrs. Ramos's husband, and Dr. Martinez as well, falsely claiming that we represented a physical threat to him and to student athletes with whom he was entrusted to volunteer. Some may not take this seriously, but I do. And I expect our board, our superintendent, all of our administrators, and every employee in this district to do the same. Either we want high character people working with our kids as per district policy 9181, or we do not, and it doesn't matter. No lip service. I heard our superintendent say this evening that he spoke with our athletic director, football coach, and principal as he sought to make a decision regarding resolution 15.01. Thank you again for your due diligence. I really appreciate it. While I understand that our superintendent has no choice but to accept whatever is told to him by these district employees, and it makes perfect sense that he should be able to trust what's being told to him, I'm compelled to share my perspective that these accounts, unfortunately, cannot be trusted. As I said, I saw with my own eyes Mr. Gibbons openly and repeatedly violating conditions of his volunteer work. And I heard with my own ears him repeatedly lying about it. And I'm sure many of you heard the same and likely saw the same as well. That's all I had time to write. I wanted to say additionally, I tend to keep these personal interactions that I have with folks private, but I feel like I need to speak about this one in particular rather than just remain silent. Each morning I go out and I run on a beautiful track we have here. Very grateful to have it. uh, oftentimes I'd see the football team out there practicing, just, by circumstance. They're out there, I'm running, I'll see them practicing. And I'd see on a regular basis, Mr. Gibbons out there actively coaching, doing defensive drills and so forth, actively coaching. On one occasion, I actually stood right by the side on the football field and spoke to our athletic director, Mr. Ray Mundy. And I had a conversation with him. And I said to him, and I'm sure he's aware of what was happening in the district regarding Mr. Gibbons. And I said to him, Mr. Ramundi, you and I are standing here right now, and Mr. Gibbons is full on doing defensive drills, which is clearly in violation of the parameters of his volunteerism with the team. We see it right now, standing here. I also said to him, this man accused me of being a threat. I've never threatened anybody here. I always come here and I try to be, I am peaceful with everyone. I get up and I speak my piece, and that's it. And I expressed to Mr. Raymundi, our athletic director, who our superintendent spoke to, my concerns with that. He said to me, I wish I could say more to you about it, but I can't speak about it. I took that to mean there's a conflict of interest, which is precisely why Mr. Gibbons should not have been coaching as board president, because it does present a conflict of interest. I kept that conversation to myself until now, but I felt the need, particularly hearing our new superintendent saying that he got this glowing recommendation from Mr. Ramundi in particular. I have a big problem with that. And I will say also publicly that this is consistent with what I've seen from our athletic director, as I've also experienced an issue with my child who experienced so much bullying here that my child can't step foot in this building anymore. And when my child and I spoke to Mr. Ramundi personally to get his help with an issue, he did not follow up in any substantive matter, completely ignored my emails, had nothing to say. When Mrs. Ramos and myself tried to hold Mr. Gibbons accountable, I got a letter very quickly from Mr. Ramundi saying, castigating us for trying to hold him accountable. My experience has been that unfortunately, Mr. Ramundi his primary purpose is to keep adults comfortable rather than to ensure the safety of our children and to ensure that our values in this district are upheld. And that's unfortunate. Has been my experience. And I want the superintendent and the board to know that. I stand publicly by what I'm saying. It's very unfortunate. Unfortunately, Mr. Ramundi is not the only one. For certain other, whether the football, I do not know the football coach, but for sure, he had to be aware of the fact that Mr. Gibbons was in violation of the parameters of his volunteerism. And the principal, who I've had a great experience with, I'm surprised that she would recommend this as well. As I've said, she, as well as being principal, should have been aware that this person broke the rules. And this gives me, as a parent, no confidence that I can trust the administrators in my school district to prioritize the values of our community and prioritize taking care of our children over keeping adults comfortable. Cronyism. Thank you so much for taking the time to hear me, and thank you for your due diligence of my concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Sadler. Is there anyone to promote? Would you like to speak? Sharon, right? Yes.
Sorry, thank you. Just running from my summer job. Sharon Ramirez, 205 Overpeck Avenue. So I'm going to save part of what I have for off agenda. I just wanted to add on agenda about the appointment now of Dr. Bender to our pre-K position. Just going back to our new superintendent, who has not gotten to know me yet, but you will. I've been an early childhood educator for 23 years. So the importance of education for our youngest learners is something that I value a lot. I know that the early years of education are crucial for a child's development. It is during these formative years that the foundation of knowledge is built, and it's essential to have a dedicated and capable director for our pre-K program here in this district. Our children deserve the very best, and it is our responsibility to provide them with the resource and support they need to excel. But it makes me scratch my head that we have made this position of director so fluid over the past year. This program had Mrs. Thiemann, then nobody, then Dr. Haynes, then again nobody, and now we've put Dr. Bender with no job description out there. I understand why Dr. Haynes was put into it because he was essentially the director where Mrs. Thiemann was the assistant director. But this really isn't beneficial to our children or the parents of the children for this program to not have this consistency. Parents of the pre-K students are losing confidence since their questions are going unanswered and the process by which the children were selected was not how it was advertised. I was a member of the ECOT committee. I don't know if I still am since we haven't had any meetings since Mrs. Thiemann has left. And I feel that the transparency that was promised has been a joke. It was promised to us, it was promised to the community, and it has not been followed through since Mrs. Thiemann has left. Since there has not been any outreach to the committee about who would be in this position or what was left of this position, I feel that we are left in the dark, and this is why we can't get volunteers in this district. I'm a very busy mom of 4. I have 2 jobs, and I made myself available for this committee because I know how important it is. When Mrs. Thiemann was in charge, we had regular meetings. As the people of the committee, we were aware, and Mrs. Thiemann was aware, that pre-K is a whole different animal than just early childhood education. I do not doubt Dr. Bender's ability to run this program. However, I am concerned about her not having the certifications for this program. There are national requirements for pre-K. Pre-K is not district by district. There's a lot that comes with running a pre-K program, and there is no bending room. I shared this with Mrs. Thiemann and the people on the committee, being that I have 23 years experience with pre-K and kindergarten, and I even shared it with Dr. Haynes when he took over, and with some board members. Since Mrs. Thiemann has left, I feel that we will lose this much needed pre-K program for our district. I'm not doubting Dr. Bender's ability since she has been our superintendent, she's been a principal, and she has qualifications to run this program. However, her placement in this position really leaves a terrible taste in my mouth. It's really how this district is continuing, and excuse my language, but to screw over Mrs. Thiemann over and over and over again. So please, I would like you to reconsider, since this district does need the pre-K program. My children obviously are beyond pre-K years, but this is a program that is very important. And by not having the people with the right certifications is a problem, and we can lose this program and the funding. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's still no one to promote, we'll close the public comments session. Trustee Kraft, would you please move faculty and programs?
I make a motion to move resolution 901 to 904.
Second.
Do we have any comments or questions on faculty and programs 901 to 904?
Yes, I do want to comment on 904, but I'm very happy to see all of these field trips for our special needs kids. I do hope we can see a lot more in the future. Thank you.
I'd also like to comment about the confidential human resources assistant position. I think it's very much needed in this district, and I'm thrilled to see that we're actually going to have somebody taking a closer look at our human resources practices in office.
If there's no further comments, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Cathcart,
Yes.
Mrs. Kraft,
Yes.
Mr. Phytros,
You're muted, Mr. Phytros.
can we get a thumbs up, thumbs down? Thank you. Mr. Gomes,
I will abstain on 903, yes to all others.
I'm sorry, abstain on 903?
Correct.
Thank you. Mrs. McNeil,
Yes.
Mrs. Rodriguez,
Yeah, yes.
Mrs. Velez,
Yes.
Mrs. Ord,
Yes.
motion carried.
Trustee Gomes, would you please move finance and insurance?
Yes, I move FI 1101 to 1115.
I'll second.
Are there any questions, comments, or concerns on finance and insurance 1101 to 1115?
I would like to comment on 1109, SLEO. I work in a school where we have the sheriff's office in the building, and it's really comforting knowing that they're there. We don't really have much problems with the kids, but I think just having them around, the kids get used to see them and they're getting used to see our students. I think that's a good thing.
Any comments? Seeing none, could you please take the roll, Dr. Cusimano?
Mr. Cathcart, sorry.
Mr. Guzman, you're gonna have to change my vote on 903 to an abstention, please. And yes, on all finance and insurance, but 1101, I'll be an abstention.
Counselor, do we need a separate motion on that and the rest of the board approve rescinding Mr. Cathcart's vote for 903?
So it was already approved, so I guess there should be a motion to amend with regard to specifically 9.03 to change Mr. Cathcart's vote to an abstention.
Can we finish the roll on finance and insurance and then we'll amend 903?
Fair.
Yes, but I think there's a pending motion, so we should finish this and then we should go to that. And then I would ask one more, if Mr. Phytros' microphone's not working, if he could, once we do that, also just verify his vote for 901 to 905. I saw the thumbs up, but if you could verbally verify.
Yeah.
Great.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I had a little problem.
No problem.
Yes, to 901 to 905.
Okay, so we're on finance and insurance for motions 11.01 to 11.15. Mr. Cathcart,
Yes,
With extensions on 11.01, correct?
exactly.
11.01.
Yes, I'm an abstention on 11.01.
Thank you. Mrs. Kraft,
Yes.
Mr. Phytros,
Yes, but abstain from those that I must abstain from that are noted already in the agenda, please.
thank you. Mr. Gomes,
Yes,
Mrs. McNeil,
Yes.
Mrs. Rodriguez,
Abstention on 1101, yes to all.
I'm sorry, abstention on what?
11.01.
Thank you.
01.
Mrs. Velez,
Yes.
Mrs. Ord,
Yes.
motion carried.
So for purposes of point of order, I would ask that Mr. Feitrus just verbally confirm his votes for 9.01 through 9.05.
Yes.
And then I think the next point of order would be a motion to amend 9.03 with regard to trustee Cathcart's vote to change it to an abstention. I think we would need a motion from Mr. Cathcart and then a second and then a roll call.
Mr. Cathcart, could you make a motion to amend your vote?
I make a, excuse me, make a motion to amend my vote on 903 to an abstention as opposed to a yes.
Second,
Okay, motion to amend Mr. Cathcart's vote for 9.03 to abstention. Mr. Cathcart,
Yes.
Mrs. Kraft,
Yes.
Mr. Phytros,
Yes.
Mr. Gomes,
yes,
Mrs. McNeil,
Yes.
Mrs. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mrs. Velez,
yes,
Mrs. Ort,
Yes.
motion carried.
Consent agenda. Trustee Rodriguez, could you please move consent agenda?
I so move 1201.
I second.
Question on 1201? Seeing none, I'd ask to call the roll.
Mr. Cathcart,
Yes.
Mrs. Kraft,
Yes.
Mr. Phytros,
I abstain.
Mr. Gomes,
yes,
Mrs. McNeil,
Yes.
Mrs. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mrs. Velez,
yes,
Mrs. Ort,
Yes.
motion carried.
Trustee Kraft, could you please move personnel?
I make a motion to move resolution 1301 to 1307.
Second.
Hold on, you gotta
Yeah.
wait. Is there any discussion on 1301 to 1307?
Yes, on 1305, employment business administrator / board secretary, there would be a need for the amendment of pending and that language to be changed to approved, as we have the approval of the executive county superintendent for the business administrator's contract.
So I'll make a motion that we amend 1305 to remove the or sooner pending review language from the amendment, from the motion.
I'll second it.
Is there any discussion on the, to amend 1305? Seeing none, I'd ask to take the roll on amendment.
Mr. Cathcart,
Yes.
Mrs. Kraft,
Yes.
Mr. Phytros,
I will abstain from 1307.
we're not there yet.
I'm
We're-
sorry. Yes,
This is to amend the language in 1305.
sorry. I missed that. Yes, it's fine.
Thank you. Mr. Gomes,
yes,
Mrs. McNeil,
Yes.
Mrs. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mrs. Velez,
yes,
Mrs. Ort,
Yes.
motion carried.
Is there any other discussion on items 1301 to 1307 with 1305 as amended? Seeing none, I'd ask to take the roll.
Mr. Cathcart,
Yes, on all but 1307, I'll be an abstention.
thank you. Mrs. Kraft,
Yes.
Mr. Phytros,
Yes, to all except for 1307, I'll be an abstention.
thank you. Mr. Gomes,
Yes to all except 1307, which I'll be abstaining from.
Mrs. McNeil,
Yes.
Mrs. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mrs. Velez,
Yes.
Mrs. Ord,
Yes.
motion carried.
Can you move unfinished business?
Sure, I'll move 1501 unfinished business.
I'll second it.
Any discussion on 1501?
I'd like to just make a comment. We tabled this last meeting to ensure that the proper protocol was followed. Dr. Vespiani did go through that, so I'm supporting the recommendation made by both the coach, principal, AD, and superintendent.
Any further comment?
The only thing I'd like to comment is, we hire people based on their qualifications and we trust them to make decisions and recommend things to us. And it's not our position to micromanage and do certain searches that people would like us to do. We do listen to the public, but this comes recommended to us from the superintendent, the athletic director and coaches. And I really don't see any other reason for us to oppose this.
If there's no further comment, Dr. Cusimano, could you take the roll on 1501?
Mr. Cathcart,
Yes,
Mrs. Kraft,
I'm going to abstain from this vote.
Mr. Phytros,
Yes.
Mr. Gomes,
Yes,
Mrs. McNeil,
I'll abstain.
Mrs. Rodriguez,
I'm abstaining.
Mrs. Velez,
No.
Mrs. Ord,
I'm abstaining.
motion does not pass.
Trustee Kraft, could you please move faculty and program 1601?
I make a motion to move resolution 1601.
Second.
Who seconded that? Thank you.
Any discussion on item 1601? Seeing none, I would ask to take the roll.
Mr. Cathcart,
I'm going to abstain on 1601.
Mrs. Kraft,
Yes.
Mr. Phytros, oh, he left. We'll come back to you. Mr. Gomes,
yes,
Mr. Phytros,
Yes.
yes to 1601,
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. McNeil,
Yes.
Mrs. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mrs. Velez,
Yes.
Mrs. Ort,
Yes.
motion carried.
Trustee McNeil, would you please move new business personnel?
Sure, I move 1701.
Second.
Any questions or comments on 1701? Seeing none, I would ask to call the roll.
Mr. Cathcart,
Yes.
Mrs. Kraft,
Yes.
Mr. Phytros.
Yes.
Oh, you want to change that to an abstention?
Abstention, I'm sorry. Good.
Thank you. Mr. Gomes,
Yes.
Mrs. McNeil,
Yes.
Mrs. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mrs. Velez,
Yes.
Mrs. Ort,
Yes.
motion carried.
Sorry, before we adjourn, what was the vote on 15.01? Just for the roll call?
On 1501, we had 3 yes, 1, 2, 3, 4 abstentions, and 1 no. It's my understanding you need a minimum of 5 to pass.
I would just ask that the board allow my office just to look into that regarding the specific vote of a volunteer for a number of votes since there were abstentions.
Sorry, could you repeat that, Mr. Disler? We didn't hear you.
I would just, before a final determination is made on that determination, whether that motion passes or not, I would just ask my office, just give my office a little time just to look into that. If, as it is typically, it depends on whether a majority of the full board is required by statute or not when it comes to the impact of abstentions. As this is a volunteer position, I just, to be frank, will need to look into whether that falls under the personnel or not. And so I would just ask the board before a final determination of whether that vote has passed or not, just to allow my office just a day or two just to look into that issue.
You're the attorney.
Can you,
So on 1307, we did have 1, 2, 3 abstentions. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yes. So that motion did carry.
Yep. Yeah, it's just, I believe it's just the 1501 because there were, I believe you said 4 abstentions.
Just a simple majority of those present. Right.
If it's a simple majority of those present, which I believe it is for volunteer, I believe the motion may pass. And that's what I'm.
Some discussion on resolution 1307 and whether or not that was approved. It's my understanding, it's a simple majority of those that are present. I have I have 8 of 10 members present here, and we have 5 of those 8 say yes.
it's my misunderstanding. I thought it was the majority of the full board.
Counselor?
Just bear with me if I would ask just 1 minute, just to let me review the vote.
All right.
Bear with me 1 minute.
Okay,
So
Mr.
I will-
Gisler, I think if it's okay with you, we're just going to move to public comments while you do your research, and then we can come back to this. Is that okay?
I think that makes sense. I should have an answer. I believe I have an answer, but if you want to give me that extra few minutes, that would be great.
That would be great. All right, so we're going to move on to public comments off agenda items while we research whether these motions have passed or not. Ms. DeSantis?
Susan DeSantis. Why is the state monitor missing again tonight?
I believe he's on vacation, but I'm not certain.
Well, according to the rules in the contract that with the state monitor, there aren't to be any meetings without his presence. And I want to know why. I'm not saying that you're doing anything wrong. I'm not accusing you of anything. Why is he letting these meetings take place without him being here? You want me to repeat it?
Yes, please.
Okay. I said, I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong. But according to the rules of the state monitor, he's supposed to be present at every meeting. Mr. Democroft was. So why is he permitting meetings without him being present?
That would have to be a question for him for next time. I don't know. I don't know what the regulations are and what he's required to do. So I really, for that.
Okay, well, you should look at his contract and the state monitor requirements. Where is Dr. Bender's office located?
I'm not certain.
Thanks, Mr. Sanders. I'm happy to speak to that. At present, I'm evaluating all office space throughout the district. And I believe, well, I know because I've seen her at Lincoln. She's temporarily utilizing an office space there. But again, I'm just going through a process as I'm acclimating to the district. Space is at a premium, and eventually I'll be able to determine an office space for these various positions, not just unique to the Director of Early Childhood Education.
Well, Diane Thiemann had an office. What's wrong with her office? What's wrong with the office at Central Avenue where Barry Haynes was? What's wrong with the office where Mr. Egan is never showing up to? There are offices available. How are parents and people supposed to get a hold of her if she doesn't have a phone connected to an office?
I think you need to give our new superintendent a little bit of time to evaluate where the best place to move somebody to is, and not.
Well, I understand that, but
Not to just put somebody someplace and then have them upended in a month if it turns out that that's not the right space for them. So if you could please give him some.
that's fine. But what I'm saying is you have an employee that nobody can get a hold of except via email with a brand new program. I'd like to go back to this whole assistant superintendent thing. It was made very, very clear by the state that this district should be run by a superintendent. There also should be no deans of students because we already have 2 assistant principals. And Dean of Students wasn't even a recognized position. Now, we went through this with Mr. Demikoff, and these positions were removed. We never had them before Dr. Richardson. They were implemented through deception by Dr. Richardson, and they were removed, as they should have been, by the state monitor at the recommendation of the state and the county superintendent. It's ridiculous to have a district this small with less than 2,000 children, 3 buildings, well, 4 buildings. It's really unnecessary. To my mind, this is just creating jobs for people all over again and going right back to where we were. I'm going to try this again. Are there any committees being formed to interview positions? And what is the makeup of the committees that have been there for years for these positions? I'm not asking for people's names, but there should be a makeup of these committees.
Yes, my process after serving for approximately 5 years as a director with oversight of human resources, I believe strongly in having multiple perspectives from various stakeholder groups to serve on a panel committee. As I'm acclimating to the district and learning, critical players in terms of administrators and staff and individuals who typically would participate in that. I'm crafting panels to participate on these various positions.
So you're creating teachers, administrators, and yourself, I guess?
I would say that it's depending on the position, but typically I recommend multiple perspectives.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. DeSantis?
At DeSantis 15 Homeport Street. First question is, Michelle, what have you done with Dr. Martinez? Is this a hostile takeover?
I jokingly told him I was going to start calling him former President Martinez, but he will be back at the next meeting, or I will be flying to the Dominican Republic to get him.
Fair enough. A few things, really. The assistant superintendent spots, and I'm not going to rehash it because it's been voted on, but if you check back, this was denied because of the district size. And we still need a director of curriculum. And we weren't allowed to have dual positions, assistant superintendent of curriculum either. So if whatever the new county superintendent is doing, I would really follow up with that knowledge that the prior monitor checked that out and we were forced to remove those positions. And if you think about it, let's be modest, $150,000 apiece for assistant superintendent, which may be low, is $300,000. Well, you already lost $1 million recently because we're not going to pursue the tuition for Little Ferry. It's going to catch up and really, really fast. As you know, I have been a fan and a supporter of most all of you the whole time. And I still have faith in you that you're going to continue to try and do the best you can to put the district on the right path. However, it's pretty clear. I don't know how else to describe it, but it appears that Dr. Bender's being punished And if you want her to go, I don't understand why we should be in a position that she's not qualified at all for. She's entitled to a principal, which doesn't mean I want one of them to leave. I'm just don't understand what's going on. What is going on? The transparency hasn't been good. Even in wanting to disclose stuff, maybe because new and afraid to say too much. And I know that I don't know what David Disler has in mind, but board policy is for personnel, 6 affirmative votes, not which way the abstentions go. Some votes, abstentions go with the majority. But board policy is 6 affirmative votes on personnel. That's what you need. I would think the coaching position is a completely non-existent issue, and please understand what the powers and the rights of the monitor. I feel like I'm lecturing you. I don't mean it that way, but you should know what are the rights of the monitor, what aren't his rights. Recommendations to the superintendent should be supported in most all cases, but you can question other superintendents before you can question on this. This doesn't mean we're bailing out on them. Welcome, Dr. Vespiani. I almost did it again. And I do sincerely welcome Tina. I really hope your success. Good luck. It's not going to be easy. I know. She says, I know. Please, I think this board is at such a cutting point in this district. And we don't want people to leave because you need to blend the new people and people that know here and understand the district and understand the history. So I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say, but please, it's only 7 weeks till school starts. No director of curriculum. And in this case, Dr. Bender has got to put a preschool program together without an office. I know you're taking time, but this is a lot of urgency right now. Even though I hear we have some declining enrollment right now, that's not going to last. So those are my comments. Have a good evening. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mrs. Malul.
Janet Malul, 163 East Grand. How many new positions are we talking about compared to what we had? Like if we're bringing on 2 new assistant superintendents.
Only one assistant superintendent position.
Okay, then where did the 2 positions come from?
That was the public discussion about how in the past, in 2017, there were 2 assistant superintendent positions. We are
I'm sorry, in
approving
2016, there were 3. In
Sorry.
2016, there were 3, 2.
So we're just bringing one person on as assistant superintendent, let's say of curriculum or of, I'm a little just confused. So we have a superintendent, we have assistant superintendent to play what role?
The title, as noted in the job description, is Assistant Superintendent of Schools. And there are various oversights and responsibilities noted in that job description.
Okay, and then where did the curriculum come in? There was somebody being hired for curriculum? Or that's part of that job?
For the job description, which is public knowledge at this point, that component is embedded in that job description.
Okay. Okay, and these jobs were budgeted for?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Where do we stand with, And I know we're really short-staffed at this point, but where do we stand with everything being in place, all the orders that maybe were needed for the new books or stuff like that, new programs for starting September? Is everything on schedule to be delivered and in place for the first week?
Yes, we've been working to approve purchase orders and in collaboration with administrators. I'm identifying areas that may need to be resolved and move forward, but the answer is yes, we've been approving purchase orders to process that.
Okay. So the approval of the purchase orders is one thing, but is everything ordered? Because with this craziness of supply and demand being backlogged, and that's my concern, because we're actually, we're at the end of July already, which I can't believe. It's just flying this summer. My other question, which is kind of off this general subject, so to speak, the summer reading programs and the math that gets sent home and all this work that the kids are supposed to be doing to keep their skills up. What happens to the special needs kids? If you have a special needs child, you have it, I'm going to use the term ESL because I don't know what the new term that Jersey calls it is. If a child's having a problem with the work and the parent can't help them, who's available to help with that? Because it's my understanding that these things are still being graded. Can somebody address that? The summer programs, or is it just really given and there's, if they do it, they do it. If they don't, they don't.
Well, we have the ESY program going on this summer, if I'm understanding your question correctly.
I'm not sure, what does that stand for?
Extended school year.
Okay. What I'm referring to, and it may be the same thing.
Yeah,
The books that they have to read, and finally they do get a selection of books to read. When my daughter was here, it was one book for every child, regardless of your level, et cetera. And I mean, I know our 7th and 8th graders are so far behind in math. I'm just wondering if they're being left on their own to try to figure out what's going, what they're being asked to do. And there's difficulty, who's available to help? And this has been my personal pet peeve in this district for years, in that kid is struggling, parents are crying, basically, kid is crying, and then they come back in September and something was due, whether it be that day, in a week, or in 2 weeks, and now you've started that kid off on the wrong foot again as far as hating what they were responsible for over the summer, and now coming in and being totally lost as they start the year off again. So I'm just wondering how that's being addressed,
I think,
or it's not.
Mrs. Malloy, I think
Mhm.
your questions are addressed to the wrong.
Okay.
That's not something that the board would ever see the detail on. If you had
Okay.
questions about the summer packet, they would be directed to the teachers
teachers.
or the principals.
Okay.
And then follow the chain of command from there. So.
Okay, that's fair. And one last thing. Dr. V said something about that for the early childhood position, it was already approved by and also the assistant superintendent, I guess, was already approved by the county superintendent. Correct?
Position descriptions.
Those positions. Okay. So what's the chain of command on this? So just because the county says it's okay, let's say you guys decided it's not okay. If you were to vote it down, does the county supersede you guys? I would hope not. It's bad enough we have the state monitor that has final say, even though I remember him saying he would never get involved with educational end, it was all financial, and that seems to have turned around. I just kind of think that it should come to you guys first before it necessarily went to the county with the assumption that, okay, I got it approved, so now you guys will approve it. That's the way it's appearing.
Dr. Vespignani did discuss this with the Personnel Committee prior
Okay.
to submitting the job description to the account. It was with
Okay,
board
because that
support
didn't
that
come
was
across
submitted.
to me that
Sorry,
way.
it was with board
Mhm.
support that it was submitted for
Okay.
approval.
Okay. I still think then that's even a bigger problem, but okay, thank you.
Mr. Sadler. Mrs. Gottlieb?
Hi, Leslie Gottlieb, 464 Liberty Street, Little Ferry. Just a couple of things on my mind. First of all, while we're reorganizing and sorting things out, who's actually working on curriculum? Because I know that's something important you guys have to do before the school year starts. Because it was, that was what Dr. Haynes was hired for, then he got pulled into superintendent, and I don't know what he actually did his last couple of months when Dr. Binder was running the show. So is there somebody at least temporarily overseeing this stuff? If you don't have an answer, it's okay. Just something for you guys to think about. And a couple of other things, I really like the board. Now, you've got Tina, who knows us, to really work on the relationship at Little Ferry, that we can have a less adversarial relationship, that the finances can be sorted, nobody's suing who, kids getting along, sharing, making the Little Ferry kids feel that an option is Ridgefield Park. And my last point is Ridgefield Park has one shining star. And again, my son is the first one to graduate from the early college. And that is the early college is your shining star. And you guys should not forget that. And you should be promoting that program, and it might help you with retaining the kids that you need to retain. And it's really worth, letting it flourish, let the kids get the degree, and encourage them to get the degree and align it with the school they're going to if possible. Because if they go out of state, it's still good. But if they actually stay in state, the credits apply and you knock off a year, 2 years, boom. It's really saving parents a lot of money. And I think it mentally challenges the kids too. Thanks.
Thank you. Mrs. Ramirez.
Sharon Ramirez, 205 Overpeck Avenue. So now I'm back. And this is more directed towards our new superintendent, so he can understand where I'm coming from. That I stand behind you, or actually, I'm sorry, in front of you today as a concerned mother of 4. I have 4 children in this district, 3 of which that are in this junior, senior high school, 1 that is in Roosevelt. I'm an advocate for education of all children. Today, I want to address a critical issue that has been lingering within our school system, the demoting and removal of Diane Thiemann as the middle school principal, and then also as the pre-K director that I spoke about before. I stand before you to shed light on the issue that deeply affects our community, the unjust removal of Diane Thiemann as middle school principal. It is with great concern that I bring your attention to the acts of vengeance and retaliation that led to removal from the position that she's excelled in. Diane Thiemann displayed exceptional leadership skills during her tenure as middle school principal. She fostered an environment that nurtured learning and growth for our students. However, instead of recognizing her accomplishments and dedications, she was abruptly transferred to the role of pre-K director. In her new position, Mrs. Thiemann not only embraced the challenge, but also secured 2 substantial grants for the pre-K program, ensuring that education development of our youngest learners. Despite her valuable contributions, our district and our state monitor failed to acknowledge her achievements and promptly removed her from this position as well. To add insult to injury, she was moved to the role of an extra basic skills instructor teacher at Roosevelt. As a concerned community members, we have voiced our steadfast support for Mrs. Thieman's return to the middle school. Time and time again, we have emphasized the positive impact she has had on our students and the learning environment. It is disheartening to witness her being shuffled around, seemingly disregarding the needs and desires of our community. Mr. Egan said her removal from the pre-K director position was due to fiscal reasons. However, we can't turn a blind eye to the fact that Dr. Bender, who makes over $30,000 more than Mrs. Thiemann, is now put in that position. So how can we justify sacrificing the talent, experience, and dedication of an outstanding professional for alleged fiscal reasons when the salary disparity among our administrators exists? And now with this added assistant superintendent position. When I spoke with Mr. Egan several months ago, he assured me that Mrs. Thiemann would be heading the BSI program for math in our district since the math scores were so low. I knew then, and I know now, that that was just an excuse, and that really just wasn't true. He was trying to push me away. It is once again disheartening that we have stood here month after month, meeting after meeting, advocating for both our middle school children and the pre-K children. I support our youngest learners, and I also support our other learners. Unfortunately, my only experience with middle school is having my own children. So I really do not understand what goes into it, but Mrs. Thiemann did. We cannot overlook the significance of strong leadership at the middle school level. This is a crucial period in our children's lives where they begin to navigate the challenges of adolescence and transition into young adulthood. They are not high school students. Without a competent person in charge, we risk compromising the quality of education and the overall well-being of our students. As I stated before, I have 3 children in the junior senior high school. So I'm disgusted when I'm hearing about the fights and activities that are going on in the high school, specifically in the middle school. My children feel unsafe here. And as a parent and an educator, that's really hard to hear. We moved here because of the schools, and I can speak very highly about the teachers and principals in this district. The placing of the middle school principal was a great job on this district. I saw the difference when my son was here and there was only a high school principal as to when my daughter was here and Mrs. Thiemann was here. And now, unfortunately, I can speak to the downfall of communication and wholeness that is happening while my 3rd child is attending the middle school in this district. No parent wants their child to feel unsafe. No parent wants their child to feel unwanted, feel insecure, especially in middle school when social emotional learning is so important for their growth. It is imperative that we address this injustice swiftly. We must advocate for the reinstatement of Diane Thiemann as middle school principal where she rightfully belongs. Our children deserve the best opportunities and guidance, and Mrs. Thiemann has constantly proven that she is the right person for this job. As a concerned parent, a teacher, and community member, I question why the demotion and removal of Diane Thiemann took place. Why are we waiting to see our kids fail when we have the people right here who can help them succeed? We need answers and action. Education is the key to a brighter future, and we cannot afford to compromise the potential of our children. It is time for us to raise our voices again, advocate for change again, and demand accountability from our district again. We owe it to our children, the future leaders of our community, to provide them with the best possible education. I will put my trust in this new superintendent, since we just met tonight, but I really need to ask you that why are we waiting for our kids to fail? It really is upsetting to us that Mrs. Thiemann has not been reinstated and the disgrace that's happening in the middle school right now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Ramirez. Is there anyone to promote? Oh, Mr. Disler.
Yes. Are
Do we have a verdict on whether our motions have passed or not?
Would you like to close public comment and then I will go through this, or would you like to leave it open? How would you like to proceed?
Oh, we should close the public comment.
That would be my recommendation as well.
Okay, public comment is closed.
Okay, I'm going to give a very long-winded answer, so I please apologize in advance. This question is a bit complicated and slightly convoluted. So I'll start with on January 18th, 2023, the board passed a resolution with the subject parliamentary procedures. So that is the process by which the board utilizes to vote. What that resolution indicates is that the board approved the parliamentary procedures of board meetings conducted under Robert's Rule of Order and related board policy for the period of January 2023 through the organization meeting of 2024. So for purposes of votes, the board both follows Robert's Rule and or related board policy. So under Robert's Rule, for purposes of an abstention, and just to be clear, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're talking about 13.07, where there are 5 yes votes and 3 abstentions, and 15.01, where I have the vote as 3 yeses, 4 abstentions, and 1 no. So under Robert's Rule, the effect of an abstention is that essentially they are as if the vote was not, those votes were not taken. So simply then we look to a majority of votes cast. But there is under New Jersey common law a requirement that you need at least to pass a board resolution an affirmative vote of at least a majority of the quorum. So I then pulled board policy 0165, which is consistent with these voting requirements. I'll just read a section of it for the record. It says all motions shall require for adoption the majority vote of board members present and voting, except as provided by statute of the state of New Jersey. This bylaw or parliamentary authority, and provided that the number of affirmative votes is at least a majority of the board's quorum. So the 2 resolutions herein, one deals with a job description and the other deals with a volunteer. State statute does not set any minimum voting requirements. Therefore, it's my opinion that simply a majority of board members present is required. But as I mentioned, and as stated in board policy 0165, you still require an affirmative vote of at least a majority of the board's quorum. So then we pull up board policy 0631, which discusses when does the board have a quorum. And it says a quorum shall consist of 6 board members where under areas where the sending representative is eligible to vote. A quorum shall consist of 5 board members where the board intends to discuss or act on any areas in which the sending representative is eligible. So that is all a long-winded way of saying that when there's abstentions, in situations where the sending representative can vote, and both the job description and the volunteer, I believe the sending representative.
I'm sorry, Mr. Disler, it's not a job description, it's actually the employment, filling the position.
Sorry, 1501 is the employment of the position, so that would require a
No,
majority.
1307 is, it's actually
Directive
approving the
early-
appointment that has already been with prior approval of the state monitor.
So that is the board affirming the state monitor's action, or is
Correct.
it the, let me pull up the resolution. To be honest, I believe if I remember correctly.
And I'm not certain that Mr. Phytros would vote on this because it's a pre-K position.
So he would not, the director, this is 13.07.
Correct.
So he would not vote on this because it does not touch upon the junior, senior high school.
He's one of the abstentions.
So there would be 9, so a majority would be 5 votes. So that vote would pass. The volunteer position, he would be eligible to vote. So you would need a majority of a quorum. The quorum for where the sending representative is eligible to vote would be 6. A majority of 6 would require 4 votes. Since there are only 3 yeses, 4 abstentions, and a no, I agree with the interim business administrator that vote would not pass. And thank you everyone for allowing me to look into this and for the very long-winded response. I didn't want to simply just for purposes of transparency, give a yes or no. I wanted to kind of walk through. So again, 13.07, again, it's a personnel decision. Mr. Vice not eligible, that's 5 votes, would pass. 15.01, you need a majority of a quorum, which is required under board policy 0165. And since the quorum here would be 6, you would need 4 votes, which is a majority. And therefore, since there were only 3 yeses, that motion would fail.
Thank you very much. I'll be glad when Mr. Martinez returns. If there's no other business, can I have a motion to close?
I move we adjourn.
I'll second.
And all in favor? Good night, everyone.